Rube, we're 5 for 5 this week.
Yeah, it's kind of memories of Arizona.
A little bit.
We didn't miss a day out there. I think we might have done 2 one day. I don't remember, but
yeah, it's been a busy week. Free agency is always fun, and even though the Eagles didn't have a ton of cap space, we knew they weren't going to be major players. There's been a lot of news, and we've talked about it, and we have some more news today. So
we promise if there's ever a day where nothing happens, we won't bother you with a podcast. But as long as there's news, we're going to be here.
Yeah, I don't think the people will mind. We get asked a lot to do. Every time there's a move, it's when's the pod coming? And here it is. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Got a chance to meet Rashaad Penny yesterday. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We'll take a look at the safety market and perhaps the reason Gardner Johnson remains unsigned this deep into the process. But first, the Eagles signed a couple players, and we'll start with Marcus Mariota. 8 years after this city could only think about Mariota, it's one of the biggest what-ifs in Eagles history, I think. What if the Eagles were able to trade up and draft Marcus Mariota? But didn't happen, obviously. Chip Kelly gets fired during that season. Right after that, it's kind of fun. And there's a part of Howie that enjoys bringing in Mariota 8 years later.
Yeah, there's no question about it. For a little bit less than Chip, a little less than the assets Chip wanted to give up. I think it was in 2015. Yeah, I'm sure he gets a kick out of that. And Mariota never became the player you would expect as the second pick in the draft overall. But that's irrelevant for the Eagles' needs. They don't need him to be a superstar first round pick. They need a guy who can come in and win a game, manage the game, not make mistakes. And he's you're not going to find a lot of better backup quarterbacks than the second pick in the draft from 8 years ago. He's a good player. He didn't play bad for the Falcons last year. He started 13 games. He was okay. He wasn't terrible. He wasn't great. It was a bad team. It was a bad situation. And he was okay. He was fine.
You could argue he was too good last year for them.
Yeah, probably. Let's see. He was 5-8. He actually started 13 games, 15 touchdowns, 9 picks, passer rating 88.2. So, that's fine. 61% is a little low. His career is like 63%. But yeah, who knows? I think. Is it an upgrade from Minshew? Probably a little bit. Minshew's not bad.
Yeah, I think it's a slight upgrade.
A slight upgrade, I think, is accurate. And, I think he's a guy that can do a lot of the same things as Jalen is. You're not going to, you're not going to put Minshew in there and not change the offense. But Mariota, he doesn't run like Jalen. Nobody does. But he can run. He can still run. Let's see what his rushing numbers were last year.
I think
he had a higher rushing average than Jalen last year, 5.2. Ran for 438 yards in 13 games last year. So he's got over 2,000 yards, 5.8 career average. The Eagles have now acquired 2 of the highest rushing averages in history, back-to-back days or in 3 days, Rashaad Penny and Mariota. So he can come in if Jalen Hurts gets hurt and do all the same things that Jalen can do. He can, not as well, but he can do those things. He can run RPO game, whatever it is, whatever you want to do. What I'm saying is he's not just a classic drop back pocket passer. So I like the move. And Howie just keeps kind of circumnavigating the cap. I'm not sure how he's doing it. We haven't seen all the cap numbers for everyone yet. Once we do, it'll be a fun pod to just kind of take a look at how he structured everything to make it all fit.
Yeah, this isn't a massive deal. It's a 1-year contract, $5 million, worth up to $8 million with incentives, which is the way a lot of backup quarterbacks have those incentives because if they end up needing to start for half a year, they could hit them and rightfully earn some more money. But that doesn't count against your cap, presumably. It might.
Well, he started 13 games last year.
Huh?
He started 13 games, so I think a lot of the incentives are likely to be earned, which do count against your cap.
Yeah, it depends on what they are, though. I mean, like I don't know what the incentives are. The incentive could be a Pro Bowl. You got to see what it is. But you're right. I mean, if it's just playing time or starts, then it might be likely to be earned. And just, I guess we should explain that if people don't know. Likely to be earned incentives count against the cap. Unlikely to be earned don't count. And the only thing that makes them likely or unlikely is if that player achieved that benchmark the previous season.
Right. So say he's got an incentive to throw for 2,000 yards. He gets an extra 500,000. That's considered likely to be earned because he threw for 2,200 last year. So that 500,000 counts against your cap this year. Yeah. If it's 3,000, then it doesn't.
Yeah. And I would imagine the Eagles know that. So, yeah. But look, Mariota made sense. He was on all the lists of players. I think we might even talked about him plenty when we were looking at who their backup quarterback was going to be, because it does make sense to have a guy with at least a somewhat similar skill set, so you don't have to like completely change the offense. And even within that, like some drop back passers have different skill sets. So it's not even to say Mariota and Hurts are completely similar, but to have, you don't have to like throw away a lot of the playbook, which is nice.
Right. And, you have a guy who's started a lot of games. He was the Titans' full-time starter for the first, 4.5 years of his career. And then he got benched for Tannehill, I think.
Yeah, almost 5 years.
Almost 5 years. Won a playoff game, I believe. Won one playoff game. The big question with a backup is how is he going to interact with the room? Is he going to be content? Maybe not content to be a backup, but is he going to accept it and embrace that role? The good ones do, and will do anything for the starter as far as helping him with what he sees on the field and whatever he needs, anything he needs. So I think, everything I've heard about Mariota is he's a classy guy who's going to do that kind of stuff. I think he's at the point in his career where, he knew it was out there. He knew this was his path. And I think every backup thinks that they're going to get in and light it up and become a starter again and get a big contract. But the best way to do the job is to do whatever your coach asks. And when you get that chance, make the best of it. Yeah,
he has a pretty good reputation around the league. So I think it makes sense from a lot of perspectives. He got a little bit more money than Gardner Minshew, who's going to Indianapolis. No surprise there. He's out there with Shane Steichen. That deal was, I have it in front of me right here. That was a 1-year, $3.5 million deal, $2 million in incentives. So $1.5 million less in what the actual deal is, and then $1 million less in incentives. So cheaper deal, and I think that kind of bears on what we were saying. We think Mariota is maybe a slight upgrade over Minshew, but that's a good spot for Minshew because we were talking about this the other day, but he goes with Shane Steichen, who he has a really good relationship with, and we think they're going to draft a quarterback, but it's likely going to be Levis or Richardson, so those guys might need a little bit of time.
Right. So wouldn't be surprised at all if he's opening day quarterback. Who knows how those guys are going to handle it, assuming it's one of them. You never know. They trade up, but there's not a lot of options there. So, yeah, it'll be one of five.
It's tough because the top two teams need a quarterback, and they're going to take quarterbacks. So,
right. So it'll be interesting. I think certainly for a new head coach, first-time head coach, to have that comfort level of a guy like Minshew who knows what he's doing, knows how he thinks, even if he's not starting, I think is really valuable. It's, you have that guy in the quarterback room who can, express exactly what the coach is looking for. That's really valuable for Steichen.
Yeah, I think it is. And it makes sense there. I wish Gardner the best. I think he was a good presence in the Eagles locker room. And even though like he clearly wanted to be a starter and he asked about it, he never like caused any problems with that. I think it was like the right the right like balance of being competitive and wanting that chance, but also not disrupting. And it sounds silly to talk about it now, but it wasn't as crazy last season. Like it's funny to think about how far we've come, but last season, like when he won that game, it was like, the offense looked pretty good with him, and I know it was the Jets, but like it wasn't completely crazy that he asked Nick Sirianni about it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Things have changed a lot in the last year. I think Jalen really spoke highly of Gardner. He always spoke highly of him and Ian Book, and just that room and the dynamic in there, and how supportive everyone was of one another. I was chatting with Ian at the Super Bowl week at one of the tables, just wait until he kicked us out of the room, and he was just talking about how Jalen made that such a good room, and everyone really enjoyed being together for that 1 year. And I've never heard anything bad about Gardner. It's not an easy thing to navigate, being a backup quarterback,
especially when you were a starter in the league and you think you have that potential. There are some backups who are like career backups, and even though they talk a big game about like thinking they're starters, like I think in your heart that you're not.
Like who's the guy you're thinking?
Like Chase Daniel.
Okay.
Like Chase always talked about like he's trying to win Drew Brees' job. Like, look, I get the competitiveness, but Chase Daniel knows damn well he's not winning Drew Brees' job. But like I get it. Like I get that. But I think you also have to be a little realistic with yourself. But I think for a guy like Minshew or Mariota, who are still in their 20s, who have been starters, who feel like they've had a decent level of success, that's not an easy pill to swallow.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Mariota is 28. Let me see it here. I think he's 28. Why isn't his age listed in his Pro Football Reference bio? It's 29. My bad. I was thinking about Chase Daniel when the Eagles traded Bradford, and he was pissed that they moved Carson from 3 to 1 past him. Like, come on!
They just traded away so much. Like, what were you thinking, Chase?
Yeah, that was kind of embarrassing. But yeah, that's a good point, and it's a tricky thing. But I think Marcus will be good, and I think Gardner will handle it well.
What do you remember from that 2015 pre-draft process?
Well, I remember sitting in the auditorium back when they let us in the auditorium for the draft, and just being convinced that they were going to make that trade. There's no doubt in my mind Chip was going to bring Mariota in. I'm still surprised he didn't.
I don't know if I'm trying to think that, like, obviously there have been big stories in the city and bigger stories than that, but I mean that dominated the water cooler talk for a good month here, maybe more than that.
Yeah. I mean, it made sense.
It was do the deal. Remember, everyone's saying do the deal.
Yeah,
they would have had to really mortgage the future to get Mariota. And I always think about, and I was listening to, I told you I was listening to that New Heights podcast with Kelsey and Daniel Jeremiah. They were just talking about how much like circumstance affects draft picks, and like a guy who's a bust in one city might have thrived in another. And I always think about Mariota, like, well, what if he came, like, how different would his career be? How different would the Eagles franchise be if he came here? Because I think he would have probably succeeded more in that offense. Maybe the team would have been good enough so that Jeff Lurie wouldn't have had that out to fire Chip Kelly, and he comes back and they don't hire Doug. Like, it's a domino effect. It's like the butterfly effect, really. It's like change one thing and everything else falls out of line. It's a really fun one. It's one of the more fun ones we've had in recent Eagles history.
Yeah, you're right. And what makes it fun is it's not just, this outrageous thing you can think of. It's something that a lot of people really thought would happen. The Eagles picked 20th that year, so they would have had to do some serious heavy lifting to get up to 2. But
the funny thing is, if Howie was running the show and he wanted it, he probably could have pulled it off.
He probably could have. We used to ask Andy Reid about, like, if you guys drafted, say, Achilles Smith instead of Donovan in '99, how would that have gone for Donovan, say in Cincinnati, and how would it have gone for Achille? And he would say, yeah, Achille would have been fine. Like we wouldn't have started him right from the get-go. We would have let him learn, and he would have been fine. And he said Donovan would probably have been fine too, despite being there. But just one little thing can change the course of so many franchises.
Yeah, it's I always love thinking about those what ifs. But he's here now, and I think it's a good move. Makes sense. I don't really have anything else to say about it right now.
I mean, the Perry Tuttle Mike Quick is the ultimate one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, the Eagles wanted Perry Tuttle. He got taken one pick. They said, we better take that Mike Quick guy so we get a receiver.
Yeah. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, huh?
Yeah, in that case it was.
Yeah. Another move from the Eagles recently, they did it on Thursday night. Greedy Williams, former second-round pick out of LSU. I was a big Greedy Williams fan in that draft a few years back, so I like it. Obviously, look, it's not a major move. They have their starters entrenched, but you're taking a flyer on a guy who's still really young, who has the size and athleticism to be good in the league, and we'll see if the Eagles are able to develop him a little bit.
Yeah, I have to tell everyone, so our system is there's so much news going on, but Dave and I alternate who writes each story. Basically, he'll write something and I'll write something. We just kind of take turns. Well, Dave was playing hockey last night, and it was his turn when Greedy Williams signed, and he was palpably disappointed he didn't get to write that story because it was his turn. He just happened to be unavailable for a couple hours.
And I saw it, but I'm looking up and I don't have time to do this.
Yeah, he's a big greedy guy. Dave's always been greedy. But yeah, it's kind of like the Rashaad Penny move. You got a former high pick who's had a lot of injuries. Never really panned out as the high pick, had some flashes, and they got him cheap. I don't think we've seen the greedy numbers, but I'm sure they're low.
Yeah, I can't imagine they paid him very much. He started some games. He started early in his career.
Yeah,
had a really serious it was classified as a stinger originally, but it was severe nerve damage. Missed the entire season in 2020. But he's 6'2". He ran well at the combine. He had an SEC pedigree. Was a second-round pick. He had a lot of first-round buzz that year. I think he kind of fell into the second round, really. He was considered to be a first-round pick, and then other guys passed him. And maybe I'm a little too – maybe I cling to the draft a little bit more than I should. This is 5 years later.
He has his favorites.
Yeah, but you end up with favorites. And I think GMs do it too. I think Tennessee did it just when they signed Andre Dillard to a 3-year, $29 million contract. It's you like a guy coming out of college, and then a coaching staff or an organization feels like we're going to get the most out of this guy. And in this case, it doesn't really matter because we assume it's going to be a really cheap deal. And I think these are the kind of players I think you're totally fine taking a flyer on.
Yeah, Buddy. Here's another Buddy. I mean, Buddy used to say when he would sign a former high pick that didn't do well with another team, Buddy would be like, I really like this Greedy Williams kid coming out of LSU. Didn't like him as much as the Browns did, but it's a good depth piece. It's a guy you'd feel really comfortable starting if you needed him to start some games, or if the Slay contract falls through again.
Oh, we should mention that.
Oh yeah.
The Slay, it is an extension.
It's
not. It doesn't mean that he's going to play out that extension, but it is an extension, which adds a couple years to the contract, actual years to the contract, and that's what's going to allow the Eagles to bring that cap hit down pretty significantly in 2023, which is that was the goal the whole time for them. So they finally found this compromise. I don't know why they couldn't find it earlier, because this was what always kind of made sense. I'm guessing Slay thought his market should have been better, but
exactly. That's what I would think.
Yeah, it just wasn't. It wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. So they've added 3 corners in the last 48 hours, all are former second-round picks. So,
Well,
right?
I don't know if you can add a guy who was already here.
No, he was released. I mean, he was all but released, but they maybe not added. That's the wrong word, but secured.
Secured. I like secured. You know how I send out those on Twitter? I like just updates, which I think are helpful for people who aren't following it as closely as us. It's just what the Eagles have done, and I was like, I got to put a Slay on there. I don't know what to do, and before the extension, I just put never left Slay. I don't know.
Yeah.
Now I can put extension.
I'm real curious to see the breakdown of that deal and how it was structured because, Howie's having a really good. We don't talk about Howie enough. He's having a really, really successful week. I would say he's done more than I expected. The guys they've lost some good players, but nothing. It was inevitable. They haven't lost as much as I thought. I am a little concerned about the overall age of some of the guys, not individually, but as a collective. But especially on defense, they've brought back some really important pieces that, man, thought were gone. So, I mean, TJ Edwards is a nice player, and they'll miss him, but you can find a TJ Edwards. Marcus Epps, you can find a Marcus Epps. Hargrave, great player. I wouldn't have paid him $84 million at 30 years old. So I think they're in really good shape. You still have the draft, and Howie, we know Howie's good at, the second wave of free agency, finding bargains. And I would even put Greedy Williams in that category. And he won't stop just because the initial flurry is going to die down. Howie won't stop looking for bargains out there. So, it's a little too early to think this is a finished product.
Yeah, and he's more than maybe any other GM. He's shown that it's never finished, really, until the trade deadline. The team's not finished.
I think he said that at the combine, right? He said the off season doesn't end until the trade.
He calls it the talent acquisition period.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, I like that. But real quick on Greedy Williams, I don't think it's even like a guarantee that he makes the 53.
Sure,
but he could also end up being the top backup outside cornerback. He might get to compete with Zach McPherson for that job.
Yeah, I would think so. He did play some slot as a rookie. Hasn't really played the slot since. Very little.
Yeah,
he's an outside corner.
Maybe I'm being unfair with like typecasting size. He's big. He's 6'2". He doesn't look like a nickel corner. Yeah,
that's fair. But he does have a little experience there, but not very much.
Yeah. Anything else on Greedy?
No, we'll see him. We had joint practices in Cleveland, and he was going back and forth with AJ Brown. It was they had a couple fun exchanges.
Yeah,
AJ, the one he made a catch over him, and Greedy ended up on the ground, and AJ was like standing over him, glaring at him.
Yeah, I think that was that was my lead on my observations from that practice day. It was just AJ hulking over Greedy Williams, who actually has the size to like match up with.
Yeah.
A guy like
AJ,
some
good action against each other. Yeah. And we'll see that. And then we'll see both of them in joint practices against the Browns this summer.
That's true. Yeah. It'll be a revenge tour for Greedy Williams.
It will.
All right. Catch all the sports action and more at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Whether it's the money line or the pass line, there's something for everyone in a great sports book. Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Philly loves a winner. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Rube, let's talk about the safety market a little bit because CJ Gardner Johnson, as of 5:19 p.m. on Friday, is not signed. And we thought he'd be signed well before this, whether it was with the Eagles or another team. The fact that he's still out there, how surprised are you?
I'm very surprised. And the whole safety market has been, other than Jesse Bates, has been really low. I never expected Jordan Poyer to get in the $5 million a year range. All those guys have gotten between $5 and $7 million. Donovan Wilson, Jimmy Ward, Julian Love got less than I expected. Von Bell, Juan Thornhill.
I have the list in front of me. Want me to run it down?
Yeah.
So Jesse Bates is the outlier here. A
Yeah,
crazy, I mean, just a more than double outlier.
right.
16 million a year. Von Bell's at 7.5, Thornhill at 7, Wilson at 7, Jimmy Ward at 6.5, Julian Love and Marcus Epps at 6, Jordan Poyer at 5, Jabril Peppers at 4.5, and then it trails off a little bit. But yeah, I mean, when we were actually doing our podcast when Bates got that contract, and our first reaction was CJ's gone. But then since then, the money has just evaporated for not just cornerbacks, but corners too. Not just safeties, but cornerbacks too. It's all the defensive back money is like non-existent. And it's got to be frustrating for CJ because he thought he was about to get paid and it's just not there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we both kind of expected him to be in that 11, 12 million range. If even maybe a little higher than that, that money's not there. And it's weird because you never know like what trends are going to, are going to come up. People talk about why doesn't Jalen Hurts take a big discount for the Eagles? Well, these guys are setting the market. So like when guys start taking 6, 7 million, I mean, that's what the market becomes. And maybe Chauncey misjudged his reputation league-wide. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's a great player yet. And we've talked about this. He's still young. He just turned 25. He is at a new position. He's going to get better, you would think. But somebody misjudged something in that camp. And so I don't know if he got bad advice. But those $8, $9, $10 million deals, they're not forthcoming at this point. So I don't know where Howie's number is. We talked the other day about like every player as they're coming down, as their price comes down, Howie has a number. And when that player comes down to Howie's number, then there's an offer, or that offer's there already and the player knows it. Like Chauncey might be thinking, well, maybe I can still get 7.5 million and Howie's number 6 or whatever. When those numbers are the same, then he becomes an Eagle. If they're never the same, he keeps looking. I'm really surprised.
Yeah, and I pointed out the safety market online on Twitter, and some people said Howie knew. Maybe he did, but sometimes the market is just different than what everyone expected. There have been years where the Eagles think they're going to. A few years ago, they thought there were going to be players in the cornerback market, for instance, and then it exploded, and they said, "Well, we can't do this. We got to bow out." And it ended up working out. But there have been years like that. The Hargrave year, right? I think that was the Hargrave year. And then they backed out of the corner market. And then, was that year? Yeah, that was 2020.
Yeah.
They backed out of the cornerback market because it was exploding. And then they said, oh, we had this money that we thought we were going to pay a corner. And then they said, well, let's give it to Javon Hargrave. Let's go back to the lines. And, there were years where they thought they were in on the receivers, and then they were super expensive. And then by the time it might have been the same year, by the time those numbers came down, they'd already spent. It's just, it's a tricky deal. You try to figure it out if you're a front office. You try to understand the way things are going to go, but ultimately you have no control over it. And sometimes things go in a different path than you expected.
Yeah, and Howie doesn't like to overpay.
Well, no one does.
No one does. Howie won't do it. Very rarely when he has no choice. But what do you think is going to happen with Chauncey?
I think they can figure out a way from the back here. I think familiarity always helps in these situations, because if you're a player, if you're Chauncey and you thought you were going to get this big payday and it doesn't come, and you have to take a deal you believe to be lower than market and maybe significantly lower than market or what you think should have been market, why wouldn't you do that where you're already playing and where you're already familiar with your teammates and you can have success and the team is really good and you're going to have a chance to get to the playoffs and maybe make a playoff run. So I think all that works in the Eagles' favor. Now, if they just get outbid, fine, but I think the likelihood of that kind of decreases the longer this goes.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of bidding left. And the other part of it is, as these guys sign, fewer teams need safeties. And when fewer teams need safeties, the number keeps going down.
I mean, I guess you could say, like, wait until after the draft, but that's a gamble.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, he's a really good player, and I think it's more likely than ever now that he'll be back. He's also, he's an interesting guy. I think he really fits. Eagles fans really like him. They like.
It's become like a singular focus at this point.
It has. Yeah, and there's a connection. There's a real connection there. Like, they like him more than, like, Nate Allen once had 5 interceptions in the season. It's like nobody liked Nate Allen, but he was a solid player for a few years. But they love Chauncey. I'm not comparing the two players because Chauncey's better than Nate Allen. But the point being, I think there's value in him being in Philadelphia for his name and his, just for endorsements. And, like, if he goes off to, signs with the Vikings or, whatever, nobody, it's not going to be the same. And this is a great market. If the fans love you, you can live off that the rest of your life. I mean, I could easily see him being in the media at some point if he's
already starting. Yeah,
he already interviewed you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if next time we do a podcast, he's an Eagle.
That would be a heck of an outcome. That would be a little Howie Roseman victory tour on that one.
Yeah, he'll be even more insufferable than usual. And you can lock up Executive of the Year again.
I don't know about that.
No, I don't know about that either. But he's on a good run, and that would certainly lock up just a great offseason.
Want to run a name by you?
Yeah,
we're going to get asked about it, so let's get ahead of it. Jalen Mills was released by the Patriots, our old buddy, the Green Goblin. Versatile defensive back who's not great, but he's been a serviceable player throughout his career, former 7th-round pick. Would you think about that?
Yeah. I'd rather have Chauncey.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like we can't get Chauncey, let's go get Jalen Mills. I don't think that should be the route. But if you're talking about like a depth piece, a player who might see the field as like a third safety or could be a backup at multiple positions on the defense, like, you don't hate that.
No, I think he'd be a nice addition. He clearly wants to be back here. I think he tweeted, I could play safety too, or something like that.
Did he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
he did play safety here. The Eagle, I mean, it wasn't awful that year he played safety. No. It was, and that was, that was such a blind payday for him. I think they paid it was $4 million for that year. He hadn't played safety in the NFL yet, and they said, he'll play safety. He'll replace Malcolm Jenkins. And you're going, what's he going to do?
Yeah. Just look it up. He just turned 20, or he's about to turn 29 in a couple of weeks. So, yeah, you can probably get him cheap. He was making a lot of money up there in New England.
Good for him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I always liked Jalen.
He kept his hair green, so he doesn't have to change that.
What's that?
He kept his hair green up there.
He did. He could just sign with the Jets. But no, I always thought he got way too much grief for a guy who was a 7th-round pick and, might have saved the season in the end zone against Julio in the right corner of the end zone. And was, he was always just a guy that worked hard and was solid. And he got some interceptions. How many interceptions he got? He got 7. Got 7 career picks for this team. That's a lot. Yeah, I wouldn't mind. Bring him in cheap.
Yeah, it has to. I mean, it couldn't be. You're not paying money for him, but he got released, so we know they're playing the comp pick game. Even though at this point they have some like extra in the bank. So.
Speaking of that, are you a little surprised all the projections on Miles are 6th-round pick?
I haven't really looked into it, but his deal is what, 4 for 25. It's really a 2-year, $13 million deal.
And the formula just takes into account guaranteed money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was a little surprised, but I did want to mention one other thing about Greedy Williams. He went to high school at Calvary Baptist in Shreveport, which is the same high school Doug Peterson coached at before he came to the Eagles in 2009. What are the odds of that?
Oh, I mean,
there's a lot of high schools.
There are a lot of high schools.
All right, that's all I got on that.
Okay, I'm glad we went back to that. That was worthwhile.
Yeah, it was huge.
Met Rashaad Penny on Thursday. Had a press conference down at the NovaCare complex.
Got some big arms.
He's a big dude. I mean, he's hulking. His shoulders are like he's a large man. Interesting. You weren't able to make it over there because he had Bird's Huddle. I was over there. He walked around and introduced himself to every member of the media who was in attendance. Shook their hand.
I like that.
I don't remember anyone else ever doing that.
I had do you remember A.B. Brown from Salem High School? He was in the NFL for like 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
He played at West Virginia. He was a great back in college. Obviously in high school. I covered a Burlington Township Salem playoff game down in Salem when he was like this. He was like all-America running back, and he rushed for like 330 yards. And back then there was like 20 newspapers covering the game, you know? And so there's this big circle of reporters around him after the game, probably, you know, like 15, 18 reporters. And A.B. Brown, before he did his interview, shook every person's hand, asked what paper they were with and what their name was, and introduced himself. I'm A.B. Brown. That's the only time I've seen that. That's
pretty impressive for a high school kid.
Yeah, very much. So I always rooted for him when he got to the NFL, and he got, you know what, he's vested. He got his let's see, I think he played 4 or 5 years with the Jets, 89 to 92, Salem High School, same high school as he had 40 career carries, but yeah, he played 4 years. He was a really good special teamer. But yeah, same high school as Jonathan Taylor. Couple good backs from a little Group 1 school, occasionally Group 2 school, South Jersey.
When they played Burlington Township, was that a Group 1 or a Group 2 game?
It was a Group 2 game.
Okay. I'll let you remember that. Yeah, but Rashaad Penny, he had a message in mind that he wanted to get out, and he talked about he needed a restart to his career. He said restart, refresh. I think that's the right outlook. He knows what's been going on.
Yeah.
His career has not gone to plan. He's been hurt a ton. I thought the newsiest bit that come out of it was that I asked him if he'd been cleared, and he said he had from the broken tibia.
Right.
So
that was in October, I think.
Yeah, so that's good. I mean, that's presumably he'll be ready for OTAs then and training camp. And if you're going to restart and refresh, it's good to be healthy to do that. So we'll see. I don't think he can expect the world because of the injury history, but there's something there with that kid.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I like the fact that he said he didn't want to talk about the injury history per se, but he did say it's important to him to play 17 games, which I like to hear. That's his goal. That's what Miles said, last year. And he did that. So as bad as Miles' injury history was coming into this past year, Rashaad Penny's is way worse.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, it's like half and half in his career,
Right. Yeah. So
I'm always intrigued too, like when a guy goes through kinds of injuries, like the toll it takes mentally. He really didn't want to get into that. He just said he's been really optimistic and positive. It hasn't bothered him. I find that hard to believe. And I don't know him. Maybe he's just a really positive person, but you would think that would affect you in some kind of way to be that. And I know it affects guys to miss a few games here or there. But
right. Well, Kelsey went crazy when they made him go in the tent for 3 snaps.
Yeah. Yeah. Now imagine doing that. Like you're living, you don't even get to go to the tent. You're in the trainer's room for a year or half a year and a quarter of a year. So, first impressions were good. I can't wait to see him on the field.
Right.
I think we'll know pretty quickly if he has the juice still.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, the last injury was a serious one, and we'll see. I mean, it's been a lot of injuries. There could be a cumulative effect. I always have a hard
You
time.
struggle with that word, man.
Yeah, I do. I should just start saying combined or something like that. But
yeah, just have an out. Break out that thesaurus and figure it out.
I see you struggle with that there.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a word for thesaurus that's not thesaurus.
The antonym book.
When I was a kid, my brother-in-law got me with because
what's another word for antonym? Sorry,
my brother-in-law got me with the word gullible is not in the dictionary because like I was my sister's much older than me. I was like 8 or 9 when she got married, maybe like 10, but like he was competitive and I was competitive with him. He's marrying my sister, and little indignant me runs to the dictionary like an idiot. It's right there. Read the definition. It took a while for it to sink in.
Yeah. He got you, but you were 8, so.
Yeah. I was young. I don't know if I was 8. I was probably like 10.
26.
All right. We have anything else here?
No.
I feel like we should end this podcast before more news breaks. We have to keep talking.
Yeah, let's do that. And I'm sure we'll be back with you guys soon.
Yeah. If not, enjoy the weekend, everyone. I think we're going to get some nice weather.
Today was supposed to be nice, and I went out for a quick run, and it started raining. It was gloomy and cloudy and windy.
I was out earlier, and it was sunny. It's looking a little cloudy here now, but I think we're going to get some nice weather.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so, too. My allergies, you heard me before the pod, dealing with a little bit. Oh, one more thing. People can stop listening. Feel free.
I think they already have, Dave.
Yeah. I learned that, like, pill bottles, you know how they had the child lock?
Yeah.
You can pop the child lock part of it off.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like it's a separate thing, and like you just pop it off, and then it's just a regular screw off. I don't have kids. I don't have anyone to get into the pills, so I can it's a regular screw off now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did that change your life?
It's nice. Nice in the morning. I wake up to go to the allergy pill, and I don't have to deal with the child lock. Not that I struggled with it.
They are really hard. They are really hard. Really tough.
I'm going to stop here. I've told too many embarrassing things in the last 30 seconds. So if you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. That's it for Reuben. I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye, and we'll talk to you soon.